All right, well, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Youth Room podcast. I am Keith Seymour, and this is
Ryne Cottle.
And we are here today to talk about the important aspect of boundaries and rest in youth ministry. So stay tuned for today's episode. Now, this episode is sponsored by Edge Clubs, and you can go to edgeclub.org/training to access free student missionary training for your students. It equips them on how to share the gospel with gospel urgency and gospel fluency, like how to actually say the gospel out loud with words concisely yet comprehensively. And then additionally, it teaches them a strategy that we use here in Northern Virginia on how to start a public school campus ministry where you can gather around other believers to hold each other accountable to sharing the gospel and then actually have it as a missionary outpost to your youth group. If you're interested in that training, you can take a look at it at edgeclub.org/training. It's 100% free. In fact, we don't have anything to sell you, so you can take a look at it without any fear of any kind of question that we might ask you to purchase something. So go check it out, edgeclub.org/training.
Yep.
Now, today's episode is an important one because our big thing that we want people to do, this is kind of why we started this podcast, is to help people stay in ministry long-term. In fact, this was a kind of a passion of mine that I talked a lot about, or I asked a lot of questions, a lot of youth leaders about burnout and how to avoid it, which we've hit on briefly in different episodes. But right now we're going to be talking about boundaries and rest. And this was actually a result of a question that we got.
Yep. We
online.
asked.
And so what was the question?
Yeah, we asked. Ended up being over 100 youth pastors, youth leaders. It was if you could go back in time to when you first started ministry and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? And overwhelmingly, the major theme was rest and boundaries and priorities. So how to prioritize your private life and how to create boundaries with ministry and create rest in youth ministry for longevity. So it was overwhelmingly, and it was interesting. It wasn't what I was expecting, but the more I thought about it, I was like,
makes sense.
Yeah, I probably could use some help with this.
Yeah, and we were talking about this, kind of gathering some thoughts before we started recording, and we just wanted to make sure that that everybody understood that we're not exemplary in this always. Like
we're recording this podcast on our off day from our youth
exactly,
ministry.
And so we're like trying to figure out like, okay, what can we say that would be beneficial that we might actually have to listen to ourselves. So it's not like we're from this high horse speaking down to everybody that needs to set better boundaries and rest. And in fact, we're probably not a good example to follow in the sense that we work a lot. Like we both, What? How did you said something? You said like and I was like, oh yeah, that's me too. What was it you said? Like
I enjoy
working. Yeah, like when you enjoy working, it's hard to stop. And so I've heard different phrases for that. It's like total worker, where it's like you just like factor in like when you're not working, not just like how much you're working.
The way I say it, I get it from my dad. It's I'm not here for a long time, but I'm here for a good time. I just apply that to life because it's like I don't know how many.
I don't think that's what that phrase is originally.
I know originally it doesn't, but like I don't know how many years I'm going to have on here, but I'm going to make the most out of the ones I got. So,
well, I remember even just early on in my ministry days here at McLean, we were there was a leader that was speaking to a younger group of staff, and they were emphasizing like, hey, like we want to work hard, like we want to work hard towards the gospel, and they said this phrase which it was they meant it as like a rallying cry of like, okay, yeah, let's work hard. But I had a kind of rebuttal from it, like, or kind of a pushback on it after hearing it. But he said, I'd rather burn out than rust out, and implying that like, okay, I'd rather be working hard so much that I burn out than to just be idle and then rust out. Yeah. And my response to that was like, but either way, you're out. and so the thing is like with that, you got to be careful because we can overemphasize even like in our hustle culture, like where you work, it's like, the results that you're not getting, it's just because you're not working hard enough. And,
absolutely.
And we do follow a different economy system that the Lord works on our behalf. Like he sometimes tells us to go take a nap because he's God and he's got it. And he works on, behind the scenes. And I just love, some of those like John Piper quotes, which I'll share some of his stuff that I've benefited from on this topic, where he said, God is doing 10,000 things in your life right now, and you're only aware of 3 of them. And so there's definitely that aspect of God is working on your behalf at all times. and we want to leverage that. And we've even talked about Martin Luther and how, he was so devoted to prayer that he wouldn't like come out of his room in the morning until he at least prayed for an hour. And then someone asked him like, what if you have a really busy day? And he's like, oh, then I pray 2 hours, and implying that like, okay, for me to have a busier day, I need to spend more time with the Lord so he can do the heavy lifting for me. So we do operate on a different, economy when it comes to work. But we have to have a godly perspective of it too, that God has given us work to do that is purposeful and meaningful. And I talk to so many people, and this is the benefit that I have from working in the parachurch, like nonprofit side, because I do fundraising for Edge clubs and on that side of things, and I meet with businessmen and people that are in the secular workforce, and they're like, man, if only I just had more time to do ministry. Like if I could give my best time to that, like that, but the Lord has kind of called me to this so that I can help fund ministries, and so I think we often think like, oh, like we woe is me because I have to do ministry. Like, like I'm so busy with ministry. And it's like people a lot of them want to be doing the stuff that we're doing, that we get to provide care, for people's souls and minister to people and the intangible things. So anyways, all that to say, regardless of where you fall on that rust out or burnout scale, we want to make sure that we're staying in ministry, that we're not leaving ministry as a result of lack of boundaries, lack of rest. And so I think that's really the only benefit that we could offer, or a point of, credibility that we can offer to this conversation, because we feel like we fail at this often. Our families probably feel like that we fail at this often, fail them in some regards. But the credibility that we have is that we've been in ministry for a long time. And so by God's grace, like he has allowed us to operate in such a way that we have enough boundaries and rest where we can stay in ministry. Now there's been times of serious burnout for me where, I've had to scale back some things, but at the end of the day, like there's so many good things that can come if you have clear boundaries and clear, intentional rest. So with that said, a couple of things that I've gleaned from John Piper's ministry, where he was asked about self-care, boundaries, avoiding burnout in ministry. And I just figured I would share some of what he shared, because I probably couldn't offer any better advice. But this has really helped me personally. So I wanted to share this. And so he said, number one is to love what you do. To love what you do. Find those wonderful aspects of your job that are really useful to young people and really godly and really that fits you, and give yourself to those. And so we talked about this before, how like some things that are work associated aren't really work. Like you were saying, like you're a sports guy, like you grew up playing sports. And so attending a kid's sports event is actually relaxing to you. Yeah. Even though that's considered like ministry, cause you're supporting a student or, and so things like that, like love what you do. Find the things that you love to do, and you don't have to necessarily cut back on those things, to really focus on getting your soul some rest. Number two is linger with the Lord every day. So we want to make sure that we're resting in the Lord even while we're working, that we're gleaning our strength from him, that we're constantly, pulling resources from God. And I think that will help us to kind of, it's almost like when there's days where you're spending more time with the Lord, I've found it almost feels like tasks are easier. Like it's almost like you're trying to, cut through butter with a hot knife. Like, it's just like, whoa, that was like a lot less time than I thought would take for that task, whatever. Absolutely. And so linger with the Lord every day. Ask the Lord for perseverance, so allow God to strengthen you in perseverance, even in the midst of crazy busyness that we can experience in ministry. Number 4, John Piper recommends keeping the Sabbath. Now, he says, keep 1 day in 7 to disengage, go out to pasture. You're not just a shepherd, you are also a sheep, and sheep need food. So find what spiritually refreshes you on that so-called day off, and don't default to the world's way. Movie and supper. That is what the world does to kick back every Friday night. And what do? You go to bed defiled most of the time with the sense of uncleanness that you went to that movie that, well, you might be able to find some kind of redeeming feature, but there was enough risque clothing or no clothing, or enough bad language and enough mean-spiritedness that you are not spiritually refreshed. So he's just emphasizing the world's way of kicking back, relaxing, is watching a movie that might actually defy you spiritually. And so he was saying to keep Sabbath. Now, I would like to hear your perspective on this too, because there's mixed opinions on Sabbath, so that's the only one of the 10 commandments that's not repeated in the New Testament. So are we under the Sabbath? And most people would say not strictly, like, the nation of Israel was, but some people still say that, like, you need to have a day off where you don't do any ministry related activity. You don't do any, work. It's just your time to recharge. And so there's different seasons that might not be practical for you, especially if you have a kid, or kids, and so it's not like just like lounging around the house, like just reading your Bible, like that's just not always practical for people in different seasons. So my question for you is, when you think of keeping Sabbath, or like because it's still a good principle whether it's a full day or not, or but to take time to rest in the Lord and to recharge spiritually. Historically, has that been for you an entire day? Or has that been like a section of time, part of a day, a few hours to recharge? What does that look like you for a rhythm of Sabbath?
Yeah, I think it largely depends on what your work expectations are. So, for instance, we don't have a set work schedule at our church. Our pastor is very much just like, create your own schedule, get it done, and hey, the gospels go forward. So, like, whenever works for you, So I guess the way I would say that is like having a 1-year-old son. Some of my most productive time is 7:30 to 9:30 at night, like when like he's in bed and like it's quiet and we can do stuff. So I don't have a set off day, but my qualifier would be if we had office hours where, hey, you're expected to be in the office these 4 days and this is the day that like everybody's in, then I would say, okay, I'm going to take a day because that's, that it's balance. And I think that's the heart of it, is like balancing, right? Jesus was exhausted like when he did his ministry, but he took time to rest and recuperate, but then he ended up back exhausted, right? Because but he knew, like, it was like charging up. It was charging up to go do what he needed to do. Yeah. And, but we see Jesus was, he fell asleep. Like there was times where the disciples were arguing and he's just like asleep. So like you think of how like Jesus, how exhausted he was to be asleep during the storm and all these things, but yet he always found time to recharge with his Father. So for me personally, what that looks like is not a true day off, in the sense of like 24 hours don't bother me. Like I'm not doing that. Yeah. And the real reason is because I've found I enjoy taking some time off each day to do something that I love. And so I can work some each day, but I can also take some time off each day. Now, you and I are both unique in the fact that our wives are both serving in ministry capacity at the church alongside of us. So normally what it looks like is if I'm taking a rest, then you're working, and then vice versa. But I enjoy, I try and work out every day, and people might be watching and be like, really? Like, we don't see it. But, it's like, I enjoy it. Right. Like we have a gym in our garage, and like, that's an hour where like I go and physically I feel better, like emotionally I feel better. Like even sometimes after a Wednesday night youth group where like it's a really difficult youth group because there's a lot of tough conversations, and we put our son to bed and I'm like, I need to go work out. Like, because it just is. It's a good time for me to just kind of flush and recharge and reset. And people might be like, well, that's not restful. Well, for me, it is. Like, for me, it's restful because I feel like, oh, man, like I did what I needed to do. And I can talk to God a lot during that. Of course, we have our like time where I'm devoted just to the Lord. But if we're just talking rest. And then the other thing I enjoy is about an hour before I go to sleep, I read. I just read. And it's one of my most peaceful times because my wife's normally asleep by then. And, I used to watch TV at night, but then I'd find I didn't sleep as well and all that stuff. So now I just read, and it's nice because I'm not looking at a screen, not doing anything, and I enjoy it. I enjoy that rest. So to me, do I take a day off? No, but I feel like I've gotten better at making sure I'm taking time to rest and recharge so that I can continue to minister to others.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think for me, so short answer is I don't spend a full day, like Sabbath day or whatever, resting. And because typically if I'm having like a day off from ministry work, I'm trying to do stuff around the house, which isn't always relaxing. Like sometimes it is, like if I'm, building something or, it's usually like chore day or like trying to get, stuff done that I haven't been able to do throughout the week. And so, so I find that, times of, just sections of time where you can rest. And I think back to when I was in college, there was a guy on my hall who, whenever you went into his room, he was awake at night. Like he was like, to the point where you're like, do you ever sleep? Like, would you ever sleep? And it was like, I was a freshman, I didn't, I wasn't like he was like an upperclassman, but he still lived on campus. So I didn't feel like I had the place to like ask him, like, so do you ever sleep? And so finally, like, I finally got the nerve up to ask him, like, what his sleep schedule was like. Cause I was like, I don't understand this. Cause it seems like you're awake all the time. And he's like, do you want me to tell you? And he was like this really quiet, kind of like introspective guy. So I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, I have a philosophy behind it. I was like, okay. And at the time he had, it was a cordless phone, like it wasn't like a cell phone, but it was a phone that, it was a landline phone, and it was a cordless phone. And he goes, and he picked it up and he said, right now this phone isn't charging, but do I need to charge it for 8 hours a day? And I was like, I don't know, I guess. He's like, no. He's like, you can charge it for an hour here, and then you can pick it up and use it, and you can charge it for an hour here. And he's like, and that's how I see sleep. I just sleep for like an hour at a time, and then I get up and I can get so much more done by just like slowly recharging. Now, scientifically, I don't think this guy is still alive. Like, I don't think you can live.
He
like
wasn't
that.
here for a long time. Yeah. He was here for a good time.
But I'm just saying, like, that's how he functioned.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I'm not recommending that that's how you physically sleep.
But the point is, we don't want to judge anybody.
Yeah. So in other words, some people they need like that full 24 hours to unwind or to to really get full rest. And I think for both of us, it's just not how we're wired. Like for instance, I can't go sit on the beach all day. I cannot do that. Like, it is like, I'm like 3 hours and I'm like, all right, you guys want to go see a lighthouse or something? Like, I can't like sit for that long, like, and just do nothing. And so maybe that's why, like, I'm just wired that way, but like I can refresh quickly and then like get back into things like, and so with that, yeah. So I would say like, find out what works for you, but the point is do it, like make sure you are carving time to do things that refresh you. Now, it's funny that you mentioned exercise, because that was number 5 on Piper's list, where he said, get exercise. And you said to hammer your body 3 times a week, make it sweat, be exhausted, reap mental benefits and that you cannot measure. And so with that, I've gotten into a good exercise routine. It's like 3 times a week, but I found my stress level has gone down tremendously. Like, and I do work out. It's pretty intense. Like it's like a full hour, like, and I'm like gross afterwards, like, and it's really helped with my just stress level. So even if you're not like doing it to like lose a ton of weight or just anything, by like just get out there and it really does help stress levels go down, which can help, with rest. So number 6 he recommends is get 8 hours of sleep at night.
Are you doing that?
I kind of am, actually.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not.
Like, I've been really a lot better at it, because before, like, there was a long season where 5 or 6 hours, like,
that's really
for a long time.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's because I'm getting older or something, like, where I've just seen the tremendous benefit of sleeping 7-8 hours, and it's usually 8 hours. Sometimes it's more, but rarely. But usually I'm a good 8 hours, and I've gotten into a good groove with that, and it's made a big difference in my life. Like, I actually feel a lot different. And so not to say that you can't, but I mean, I can still function on very little sleep. Yeah. So my wife used to say, like, you were made to be youth pastor because you can like go to a camp and like not sleep at all.
That's my wife too. Yeah.
And so I still got that, but I still really like a good night's sleep. All right, number 7 was have a couple of soul brothers or sisters that you love to hang out with, talk about everything with, and then let them pray for you. So he's saying just having that community of other people that care about you, and I think that can be beneficial if it's some people maybe outside of your church context.
I think it's important that it is.
Yeah, it's like for like you and I and stuff. I feel like we can talk, like we've gone on double dates with our wives and stuff, and so we can hang out and stuff. But yeah, to have someone outside your church context, it really helps to kind of have that community where you can share about ministry things, and people are like, oh yeah, like we'll be praying for you for, and that's something that we've struggled with. That I think I've shared with you about being on staff at a church, even in other, like, so we lead our church group that's not youth ministry, but we lead one of our small groups, for our church. And even like, there's been times where we've like tried not to lead it, but like we're there and everybody still like looks to us every time they answer a question, and we're like, we're not the leader, but it's just you're on staff, so therefore you're the leader. Like, it's like an expectation. And so because of that, like, there is like a level of expectation of like, leadership that you provide. And So yeah, so we've always wrestled with that, being in ministry and still having those deep relationships that you can share with. So, and then number 8, keep your eyes on Christ and his loving you and making much of him. Don't let your eyes drift towards. I've got to have some growing crowds to here to be made much of by the kids. And they've got to like me. So like, don't make it about your likability or about your, the growth of your ministry, but really make it about Christ and making much of him. And I agree with all 8. I mean, there's some good ones. And so when it comes to rest or boundaries, there might be some people out there that are in a season of burnout, like where they're just, they're just maxed out. And I would say I have experienced this in like different seasons of ministry. If your church allows it, not every church does, but sometimes there's like a Sabbath allowance, like where you can just like take some time off and go refresh, recharge, whatever. And there's kind of 2 different aspects of that. So if you can do that, I would say I'd recommend it. Like it's a good, I've done one Sabbath in the almost 16 years I've been on staff. And when it comes to, rest, like or a Sabbath, I'm sorry, not Sabbath, a sabbatical.
I knew what you meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Did I say Sabbath all the times though?
Mm-hmm.
Old age, man. Old age. So sabbatical. And so the sabbatical for me, as I did research even leading up to the sabbatical, there's like 2 schools of thought on like taking a sabbatical. It's like, one, you're going to write a book.
Yep.
Or like you're going
to tell us,
or you're going to get a new degree. You're
Yeah.
going to get a new degree or write a book. And the other one's like, we don't want you to do anything. Like we just want you to unplug, recharge, spend time with your family. Like, if you want to write or, if it's helpful, then that's good.
Yeah.
And so whatever works for you, like, I mean, there might be expectations from your church. It's like, you're going to, go learn more and get a, degree or take classes or whatever. But I would say, yeah, so to have a sabbatical if you can. But also, yeah, even just taking some time off, like whether that's, you're not able to do a sabbatical, but like
getting away,
I think is key. And unplugging.
That's what I found. When I get away, then I do a pretty good job of not working, right? Because there's actual boundaries. Like you can leave your laptop at home, like you can do things like that, So that's what I just find. It's like, if I feel like a little run down, I'm like, we need to get away. Like we just, even if it's a day or 2, doesn't have to be a big plan thing. It's like, let's go to grandma's house. Like, let's just get away.
Yeah. Well, and also I think when it comes to boundaries too, and this is a lot of questions that we've gotten, as well, as far as like boundaries of like, access.
Yeah.
That you allow students to have in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things I think there's a danger in that you can, one, like see this as a punch in and punch out type of role where it's like, oh, it's after 5 o'clock, not answering a phone call. Like, and I think you can miss opportunities if you have that mentality, to where, but then also you want to guard your, time, with your family and stuff like so.
Yeah.
So I think the do not disturb feature on my phone has been so revolutionary for me to be able to just turn it off and let people know that like if they go to text me, they're like, he has do not disturb on. I'm like, oh, he's not going to answer me right away, so it must not be. And then sometimes they'll still text and I'll get it later and I'll respond. Mm-hmm. But to realize that like being 24/7 accessible is a new concept, even in ministry. Like it's a new concept since technology is advanced. So like before, unless you went over to the pastor's house, you didn't get to talk to him after he left the church.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm saying? Like you'd have to wait till the next day. And so with that, so just keep that in mind that people pastored people for centuries without being 24/7 accessible. So just throw that out there. But also the boundaries aspect of that too is I think if we're not careful, we can play into that and think that we're needed all the time.
I remember you told me, I said, what if a kid needs to contact you late at night? And you looked at me and said, you're probably not as important as you think you are. And I still remember that. I was like, wow, that's a good point. Like, I think if they don't have me, like, what are they going to do? And it's like, no, like, God's got
I think we can, like, it can play into our ego a lot when we feel needed a lot. And so when we kind of relieve that, and I think that's something that I've learned more in my, longer year or like more advanced years of youth ministry is people don't need me as much as I thought they did.
No.
And I think I might have even elevated myself more than I should have in some way. It's like where I need to have, they need to be accessible like to me all the time. Like, and if they call me, I need to pick up. Cause what if happens if I don't pick up and then they feel like I rejected them? It's like, yeah, I mean, there's so many things there, but But yeah, I think we can kind of have a guy complex when it comes to like, okay, no, my people need me like all the time, and need, and so yeah, so I think there's we just be cautious about that. Yeah. All right, let's get into some rapid fire questions, and this is on the theme of rest in some regards. Actually, all three of them are on the theme of rest. Number one is, what is your favorite hobby?
Yeah. Like I said, I enjoy working out. That's
it doesn't show,
even though it doesn't show. But no, it was, and that actually was tough because playing college athletics, I worked out when they told me to work out. I did what exercises they told me to do. So when I got done, I was like, I need a break. And then I took a break and I was like, I feel terrible. I need to get back into working out. So we have like a little home gym, and it's kind of nice because it's right there. We have a detached garage. And so my wife and I, it's kind of like, you don't feel bad taking a break from like parenting or doing those things when you're like, I need to go work out for an hour. So that's kind of been really nice for us. And then reading, recently I love reading. And so it's kind of almost like I just see how many books I can read a year. But like, again, I feel like I'm learning something. I feel like I'm learning because I read all kinds of things. And so again, it's like restful, but like at the same time, like I feel like I'm learning.
So
and
you're
like
reading like a lot of like Cat in the Hat, like Dr. Seuss stuff.
Judy B. Jones is mostly my favorite thing. No, I'm a history buff, so I like reading all that stuff. So
very cool.
I know your hobby, but
they might not.
They probably don't.
Yeah. So I like building vintage motorcycle tributes. Yep. So and I say tributes because they're not exact replicas. They're not originals because I can't afford originals. But early 1900s motorcycles, I have a strange fascination with early motorcycle history. And because of that, I started building vintage motorcycles, and it's developed into a fun hobby business where I teach other people how to build them too. So Seymour Cycle Works is the name of the thing. And I've grown like quite a bit of a following on Instagram. Like
surprised me when I saw
100,000 people. And so it's been a way to leverage even ministry and share the gospel with people. And so, yeah, but that's probably my favorite hobby is what I think about a lot. And I get to, like, I so nerd out when other people like tell me that they like early, I'm like, I'm one of those guys that like will start talking about stuff and then I just, there's no end to talking about it. It's weird. Sometimes I have to repent on how much I think about old motorcycles. But, okay. So favorite kids movie. So that includes like Disney, Pixar movies, like any kind of kids movies. And you don't even have to use it under the guise of like, oh, I only watch it because my kid watches it.
No.
What is your favorite kids movie?
Oh, you go first. What's yours?
All right, so huge fan of the Cars trilogy.
Cars trilogy. Cars 2 is terrible.
It's a world tour, man.
The International Spy with Mater. And
it wasn't terrible. There's way more sequels that are worse. But I would say it's
not great.
It was a good plot. All right, so I like the Cars, but I mean, yeah, I mean, Toy Story.
It's classic.
Toy Story is like,
yeah. I think does it have to be animated?
I'm gonna say yes.
Oh, I was gonna say Rookie of the Year because that was like the movie I watched as a kid.
Yeah,
a lot.
What caused you to be a baseball fan?
No, I watched it because I was a baseball fan. But if I had to go animated, I would say. Oh, Wall-E. I don't know.
Really?
It just popped out. I don't know.
You're the first one that's ever said
It's not my favorite. I'm blanking. I don't.
Okay.
That's what I'd say.
Saddest kids movie.
Fox and the Hound.
Which that's like it's underrated. It's actually good quality.
We
just watched it at our family movie night a few weeks ago. I told you about this. Like,
yeah,
it was rough though.
I'll never make my kid watch it.
It was emotional.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't remember it being sad.
I remember it being
was sad.
Least favorite, Alice in Wonderland. I was freaked out by that. Still am.
Up.
You're freaked out by Up?
No. Saddest.
Oh, it's only at the beginning.
I mean,
it's got a happy ending. Fox and the Hound ends sad.
Wait.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like ends happy, but like
the
majority of the movie is like sad. Up is like the first part.
Yeah. It's sad. All right, so we have another. This is controversial. I think I know your answer.
I forgot the question, so I'm gonna be surprised again when you ask it.
Should you have couches in your youth?
Oh yeah, no, I remember.
This has to do with rest.
Yes. No. When I first came in, there was couches everywhere, and I was like, they're all going. Now, if you have couches in your youth room, I don't have any problem with you.
I have couches in my youth room.
Okay.
But we haven't had it, like, the second that there's an issue, I mean, in other words, I'm not like, yes, we have to have couches. We've never had any issues, like, with kids too close. Well, yeah, you haven't either.
Because we don't have any couches. So I don't even have to worry about it.
So, yeah, so with that, I think couches in the youth room could be a dangerous idea.
Also just smell.
Yeah.
They just stink.
I can see that. There actually is some stains on our couches.
We just we just have stools and chairs. Yeah, we don't.
That's a good call.
Yep. Yeah. And it makes it nice when somebody's like, would you like our 20-year-old couch that half works? It's like, sorry, we don't have any couches in our youth room.
Yeah, so we do have couches, but I wouldn't say like I'm like have to.
Yeah.
I think, and if there was ever an issue, they're gone. Yep. All right, so let's do some 1-minute questions. So we have a couple 1-minute questions that we're going to have to go through. You got a timer up?
I do.
All right, so you're going to go first.
I'm asking the question first. Or
I'm asking you this question.
Okay.
And it better be good.
I'm ready.
Just putting the pressure on. Okay. The question is, how can I be sure of my salvation?
So I think James says it best when he says faith without works is dead. So he is not saying works are necessary for salvation, but he's saying if I have true faith, then I will have evidence in my life to show it. One pastor once said, I can't remember who, but he said, if following Jesus isn't changing you, you might not be following Jesus. Mm-hmm. So when I look at my life, I should see evidence of Jesus working through me. For instance, salvation is, we believe, one time, but then there's sanctification. But if I'm truly saved, then I will see that evidence. So if I come across somebody who's unconscious, I'm not going to ask for their birth certificate and say, when were you born, right? I'm going to check for vital signs and see if they're actually alive. So it's the same thing. You don't have to know a date to be saved, but we do believe, you're only saved once. But I should have evidence in my life that I can point to say my life is different because of what Jesus has done for me.
Yeah. Good stuff. Right under a minute.
Thank you. All right.
All right. Do you know the...
I do.
The question?
All right. Keith, in this day and age of technology and all different podcasts and different things, why is church attendance so important?
Yeah, so the New Testament has 59 what they call one another passages where we are to love one another, care for one another, not neglect meeting with one another. There's 59 of them. Some of them are repeated. But the fact that there's so many commands and contextually almost all of them in context are referring to the local body of Christ. So for you to join the universal body of Christ, meaning like you become a Christian, but not actually exercise your local one another, like biblical community, living out your faith in community with a body of Christ, then it's similar to someone saying like, well, I just joined a gym, but I refuse to work out at the local gym. So it's like, I joined a Gold's Gym, which is like a national chain, but I'm going to refuse to work out at the local gym. It's like, no, that's the only way you can work out at it. It's like, you have to go to a local gym. Yeah. So I think there's danger in just being a part of an online church, whatever like that you can miss out on living out to one another's, because other people need you and you need other people.
1 minute, 1 second.
You could probably cut out something from there.
I won't. It'll just be a cliffhanger.
Just be a cliffhanger. Yeah. All right. So let's cover one more.
Okay. All right.
So you're gonna ask me this one?
Yeah, I'll ask you. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Keith, why is baptism important?
Well, one, it's commanded. We follow Jesus' example in the New Testament. So Jesus was baptized, and then also it's commanded to repent and be baptized. But mainly it's to show a public proclamation of the inward commitment to Christ. The way that I like to describe it is a wedding ring. So like if I'm married, I usually would wear a wedding ring to demonstrate like, hey, I'm committed to one woman. And so when we publicly proclaim an inward commitment, now does putting on a wedding ring make me married? No. Does getting baptized make you a Christian? No. But it's a follow-up to publicly proclaiming the inward commitment that you have with Christ and your relationship with him to symbolize that death, the burial, the resurrection, coming out of the water. We believe in believers' baptism, full submersion.
Man, you redeemed yourself.
I even had 10 seconds
under
to spare.
50 seconds.
Yeah,
if only you could spread those out.
Woo! All right. Well, that concludes our episode today on boundaries and rest. If you are getting any benefit from this, if you're laughing at our jokes, which may not happen if we're some people might
We're laughing at our expense.
Laughing at our expense or laughing at our jokes. We would love for you to share this with other people that can benefit. We have seen a huge increase of people watching our short clips on YouTube and social media platforms. So if you're not following us on all the platforms, we're on Facebook, and TikTok is actually the fastest growing channel that we're on. We have YouTube. We have
Instagram.
Did I already say? I said Facebook. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So all those things we have. Make sure you're following us on all those platforms if you're on them, and it helps us to get seen by more people. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.